cannot believe you have a Philadelphia Eagles hoodie on. That makes me so tremendously happy.
Why are you an Eagles fan?
I grew up in Delaware, so I am a legally obligated Philadelphia Eagles
I live half and half because I used to be in Boston for 11 years.
fan.
So I have like a Patriots hoodie that I wear on a regular basis because that's like one of my teams. But I'm home and this is what I have at this moment.
Hey, at least you don't have any Cowboys gear, right?
Never.
Oh, thank God. Hi, everyone. Welcome to OSA Backstage. I'm Dani Meyer. This is Oa. And on today's episode, Serena and I are talking to Lina González-Granados. She's our guest conductor for Jocelyn 5, Mozart, and Dvorak. And two things. One, she is, as she says, what you see is what you get. And that was the spirit of the whole conversation. Absolutely loved it. And two, she may be the only person I know that owns both Philadelphia Eagles and New England Patriots gear, but she wore the Eagles hoodie to this podcast recording, so bonus points to Lina. In any case, you're going to love it. Enjoy.
Never, never. No, but my pets is just like I was there when the two big Super Bowls. So, and it was like the beautiful, like the era of the Deflategate,
Mm-hmm.
it's what it is.
At least Patriots fans have never thrown batteries at Santa. And
Oh,
you
yes, that's
cannot
true.
say you can't say the same thing about the Eagles. They have
Oh,
definitely
yes,
thrown batteries.
rowdy.
Amazing. Have you ever met Serena? Have you and Lina met before?
We have not met, but actually, during COVID, Lina created something called the Conductors Collective with Kensho Watanabe. I'm sure you found, and I actually sat in on many of those sessions, and I still
Oh,
had her notes in Fawn written in my score when we did Fawn just a couple months
it
ago.
makes me very happy.
Mm-hmm. And like Lina is like the stories we heard. It was one of the most incredible things we had during. I'd love, we could talk about it on the podcast where it flips from mentorship to being a mentor. I feel like Lina was an incredible mentor to all of us during COVID when we were tuning in, and everything she shared with Kensho, their experiences, their notes, their ideas, and the fact that you should, unless you've copied down every line of Rite of Spring, do you really know Rite of Spring?
Uh, that makes me very happy. Thank you for telling me that.
Yes, no, we really look forward to having you here next week and looking forward to
I'm
seeing you.
very happy. I'm very excited. It's been a long time going with this program. So I'm just excited and elated to just let it out.
Oh, but it's been such a long time since we've talked about it too, since we even just
Yes,
put it on
exactly.
paper. Um,
Exactly.
Before we dive in, would you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Lina González-Granados, and I will be conducting the magnificent Omaha Symphony next week.
Where did music start for you, Lina?
I think music started since the beginning of my life. I come from a very musical family. Not necessarily they were professional musicians, but there was music around me at all times. And I started as a pianist when I was maybe 3 years old with those little pianos, like little Casio pianos. I mean, when you hear that, you know how old I am right now, like one of those little ones. And my grandfather used to have these LPs and tapes with classical music, and at 2 or 3 years old, I would play the notes on the piano and like try to transcribe my symphonies, and that's how it started for me. It started as a game that morphed into my piano my piano experience a little bit later in my life, and after piano also I was in little choruses and different kind of ensembles in school, and that just made it very like a very happy childhood surrounded by music. And when I went to school in Colombia, in Cali, started as a pianist, and then very soon I realized that that wasn't going to be my trajectory or anything that I was dreaming of. It was like the first big disappointment of my life. Like, how do I pivot from this? Because I know that the only thing that I want to do is music, but I know that I don't want to spend 12 hours sitting on a piano.
Okay,
Uh,
so it was the actual act of making the practicing your entire world that changed your trajectory.
yes, because I think the big part of it, it's just music practice. In that time when, I mean, I was a teenager, felt very lonely, and I'm already very shy, very introverted, and all I wanted is to have friends and a community. And I didn't think with that amount of practicing that I needed to do, I could get closer to a community. It's not like, for example, when you study, I don't know, a woodwind instrument or a brass in school with band, and you already have your community of peeps. I didn't have that with the piano. So choruses and working with choruses and singing, just opened a universe of community for me. And that's how I pivoted to conducting. It was motivated by the fact that I was going to be interacting with a lot of people on a regular basis, which is the paradox because when you're like already a professional conductor, you spend a lot of time, with your scores. It's the same as piano. Just I think it makes it more comfortable knowing that there's going to be a week, for example, like next week, that we're going to meet and we're going to make music together.
It's okay, so that's fascinating because you're right. The Serena, I was just going to ask you. It's like obviously score study is the same lonely exercise, but you know that eventually you're going to have to be surrounded by other people to execute it, as opposed to a piano recital or performance where you might be all by yourself, still lonely, even with an audience in the room.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, um, even that practice, we have something to look forward to every week in youth orchestra or in band. You will always kind of get together, rehearse together, and then go on. So your practicing is always, in looking forward to a moment of community. I absolutely understand that, and I can see why you pivoted.
Did you have? I want to go back really fast to your grandfather and his LPs. Do you
Mm-hmm.
remember what symphonies or what pieces he had?
For sure. I think my very first was Beethoven 5. And I don't even remember the version because I mean, 4 years old. Or the other one was Symphony number 40, Mozart. And the two of them are very dark, and just extremely captivating and direct. Like nothing more direct than the beginning of Beethoven Fifth. And also my grandfather, in his practice, he had a bust of Beethoven, which is very weird because he was a doctor, and he would put me, close to, like, in the office, and he would like take care of me, and I would be watching this gigantic bust of Beethoven and listening to that music, and I couldn't believe it. I remember how overwhelming it felt to just be in the presence of something this deep at a very young age.
He was a doctor with a bust of Beethoven in his office.
Yeah, because that's what they used to give doctors, CDs and LPs of classical music and medications as well, like how do you call it? The people who go and lobby for medications,
The pharmaceutical
Yes,
reps, yeah.
exactly, pharmaceutical reps. So that's what they give them, and a bunch of papers, and that. But he would always get those CDs and, greatest hits of all time, and it wasn't his music, but he would put it for me so I could, I don't know, have a little bit of more cultural background, and it was fantastic.
Do you remember your first orchestra concert?
No, but I do believe the first orchestra concert that I felt completely drawn by and it was I was already a little bit older, was like maybe 17 years old. I was already in college, and I went to a Dvorak 9 performance by the Colombian National Symphony close to my city. In that was in Easter week. I remember that vividly. So it was the combination of going along with my friends to another city, and we went to a concert. And when I heard that music, the Dvorak 9, it was live, a very transformative experience. And my first Beethoven 9 also was, I was already older, in my 18 or something, and that was impossible to describe how happy I was and overwhelmed and like touched.
Were those moments part of the reason why you wanted to try conducting, or was there a choral moment that led you to conducting instead?
It was a choral moment, and I was
Okay.
singing uh, Beethoven Ninth. I was singing, and it was just like one of those moments that everybody's breathing at the same time, and then there is this presence of the conductor with their gaze very committed to the I don't know, to their vision, and in that moment you feel absolutely seen. And I remember a very particular moment, feeling very seen uh, in those when I was singing, and the feeling my contribution heard, even though it was a chorus of like 250 people. Of course, I was part just of a mass, but feeling seen and feeling that I'm contributing to something greater than what exists on a regular basis was the moment that I said, okay, it's awesome to sing, but making someone feel seen is what was amazing about conducting. And that's why I pivot. I was like, okay, this is natural for me. I think that's where I need to be. Um, which was a very deep change.
So what did you have to do at that point to get on the podium? Like where did you start to try and make that change?
Uh, well, I started in college. It was
Mhm.
a gigantic shift, and I want to say a big journey. I don't want to say a struggle, but it was a journey because at that moment I was like, okay, I don't want to be a pianist. I don't want to graduate with a title like an undergrad title in piano. I want to be graduated in conducting. And at that moment, my university in Colombia, like they had an obligation to graduate you by law. If you are far away in your studies, like, and if you haven't, I mean, I was an honor student, but I
Mhm.
wanted to shift. And for the teacher to say, okay, I can take her to do an undergrad instead of doing a postgrad, which is what the musician that the university offered. So I had to talk to the dean, to the provost, please give me opportunity. And they were like, yeah, of course, yeah. And she's not gonna be, like, I don't think anybody could see, of course, how far I could get. And because that nobody would do that in Colombia at the moment. And we're talking about, this is 2006, 7,
Mhm.
so 20 years ago. So it was like, okay, let her do, it's almost like a Darwinism. She's like, this is
Oh,
going to be
yeah.
figure itself out. So let's give her the opportunity. And it was kind of that mentality. And because I'm relentless, I was relentless in see seeing myself how far I was going to get. Uh, One thing is like I was very like, I don't know, I don't want to say like rebellious, but I was just Yeah, relentless. And I didn't know any better. I only knew that that was the path that I wanted to have. And so why not? I started looking for opportunities outside Colombia. And that's how I landed in New York. And, I needed to do a little work with my English, my working English. So I took classes in Juilliard. They had an um, adult classes at Juilliard at night. So I was in my last year of school. I chose to have like a little bit of a gap year and stay here and tried my luck. I got to meet some people, and then I started applying for other opportunities, and I landed in my master's like a year and a half later from that in Boston, and that's where I stayed. And I always saw the United States as a place that could hold a lot of opportunity, and I always felt the dream could be I don't know, pursue here more than in other places. And that's why I believed in that. I took a chance on coming here, and that's why I stayed here in the States.
I love so much this idea of you don't uh, I recognize that idea of I don't know better, so I don't know better, so I'm going to do it anyway because this is what I want. And I remember going to college and showing up for undergrad auditions, and I was the only bass player in Delaware. That's how it felt growing up. And so I didn't realize what was out there, and I was just excited to try. And if people were going to give me a shot, then I was going to go for it. And that sounds like that's essentially what you were saying. It's like I'm going to go where people are going to give me a shot. Did you find when you finally got to Boston, did you already have mentors in place who were helping you make these decisions, or were you still primarily making decisions on your own?
Oh no, I have been making decisions on my own since I told you I entered a school. So um, I did find amazing teachers in that process, but I was still calling the shots on my life. And I think that's how I have always felt. I've been, I haven't, as grateful as I am with every single person who has been in my life, especially now in this later part of my life. It's a different situation than when I was in Colombia. I felt that the grit and the journey was only mine to make, because I at that moment there were that many Latin American women that I knew that were trying to do this, maybe one or two.
Mhm.
And for me, I have always been like, I have always looked at, if someone looks at like the first, for example, ideal person that I met throughout this process was Alondra de la Parra, who's a Mexican American
Mm.
composer, very well established in Europe. And she was the first like real person that I saw that I was just like, oh my God, I admire her. And like almost like a starstruck moment, because she looked like me. She was from Mexico. She was young, and she was, fighting for the space, and or not fighting, just like trying to figure out her space in this industry. And um, so with having so little people to look up to that look like you really need to carve your path. And I don't think any mentor at that moment had the vision to see if that was going to go far. And like, I'm not saying that I have arrived or that I have gone far, or nothing like that, but it's just I knew that I needed to go farther and farther, and they can only give you what they have experienced.
So
I don't
you
know
had
if
to
that.
keep pushing. Yeah,
Yes,
that made perfect
I don't.
sense.
I hope it doesn't sound bad it sounds bad or disregarding to anyone, not at all. It was just that I have always seen the good of what they have offered me, and that's it, not more than that they have given me. It's like, oh, this person can take me this far. No, it hasn't been like that. I have always like received these gifts of mentorship just very objectively.
Mm-hmm.
So the master was the masters, and then
It makes
farther.
total sense. That makes total
Mm-hmm.
sense. It's being grateful for what's possible, but not expecting anyone at any point to take you more than you yourself are going to take you someplace.
Exactly.
Do you have, like, is there a specific moment where you felt like, have you ever felt like you could rest, or are you always thinking, what's next? How do I continue to grow?
Today I was having like one of those meltdowns that one gets when it's very tired, when one is very tired. And I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think I ever had a real vacation I think in 3 years. And it's something that I need to do better, but I just strive in the challenge. That's the challenge has always been something that I see and embrace very positively and that I love. So I'm always thinking, what else is out there in terms of repertoire, in terms of, like music never ends. There's people composing new things, things that are happening in the world that needs a response, and that they need someone to talk about it. And that's why I don't think I rest. But in terms of milestones, like, when you're like a conductor, it's like, okay, you do this, and then you're assistant, and then you win something. I don't think I've ever have seen it like that. It's not a trajectory that it's linear. So yeah. But to answer your question, no, I don't rest.
How about when did you is there or rather, was the conductors collective that Serena was talking about, was that maybe the first time you realized that you were functioning the way that Alondra de la Para functioned for you, where you were being visible for people who might need to see someone like you, be visible and accessible? Because I think someone can be visible, but if they're untouchable, or they're so far off, they're so unattainable, then they don't seem real either.
That's a very interesting question. I'm going to tell you why. Because to this day, when Serena mentioned about the Conductors Collective, um, like it was never like our intention to create visibility or creating, for ourselves, but it was more like to take a moment to stop and break some glass ceilings that we saw in that moment of mentorship. And it was just to open the possibility for other people to experience the gifts that we had. Because at that moment, it was just so cataclysmic, the pandemic. But to this day, I get surprised when people said, I went to a conductors collective. And it happens more often. And and sometimes I can't believe it, because we were like so in it at the moment. We were just, when we did the conductors collective, it was crazy because we started our first meeting maybe a week and a half after the pandemic started. And I'm going to tell you, I got COVID on the 17th of March of 2020. So I was like one of the first people that my family and my community knew that had COVID. So that's like a long time. And while I was having COVID while we were creating the Conductors Collective, and I was finishing my doctorate. And we were just, rehearsing. I think it was our survival mode for Kensho and me, a way to keep each other engaged. And we did 27 sessions of that. It was crazy. Every week for 27 weeks. Um, and we still go to places, and it's like, oh, I went to a conductors collective, and I just can't believe it. So it wasn't like, it still humbles me a lot.
It sounds a lot like how you felt about piano playing and score study, to be honest, where it was the concept of being alone and losing your community was too much, and whether or not you did it on purpose, you were going to make a community, damn it, and let people be able to show up.
No, but the things when we started, that wasn't my idea. It was Kensho's idea to start. And he was worried, like his motivation was undergrad people who would be without, like, undergrad conductors who would not have an opportunity to experience community. And I thought, this is amazing. Well, let's do it. And I thought, like, we really thought that it was going to be 2, 3, 4, 5 people that would come to our talks and we would be interested. And then it became such a, I don't know, like a snowball, because it was the one of the first one, like, webinars that existed, and us, discovering that and calling our friends. And then it was people from 37 countries. I mean, it really blew up. So we didn't know that that was going to be how far it went. It was more than 7,000 people. And a lot of people weren't conductors, they were just musicians. And we had a rabbi that came to the 27, that he didn't have any musical experience, but he just enjoyed us, talking about a lot of things. We were vulnerable. I hope we were funny. I don't know, Serena.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
it was, and we are very different. Kensho and I, we are like the yin and the yang, but we're best friends, So while he's a little more mindful, I'm just a little more loose, and it worked somehow.
Well, I love that so much. Well, that's the reason why we come to the concert hall, right? That's why you come for live music. Is it doesn't matter what you do during the day, what your day job is, what your background is. At the end of the day, you come to the concert hall to be together and experience that together, whatever you need to take from it. And as I was reading up and listening to your interviews and getting ready for today, the two things that stuck out were just being true to yourself no matter what, that is the most pure thing you can do as in service to the music, is bring yourself to the music. And the other thing is being constructive rather than destructive, which I think you talked a lot about with your mentorship with Bramwell Tovey and Bernard Haitink.
Yes, he was a saint. They were very nice, and also Marin Alsop and Ricardo Muti was also an extremely comforting person. I love working with him, and Yannick. I've been very lucky to have these people in my life, and they, Bramwell was my teacher in doctorate, and he came to my life in a moment that I was doubting a lot, about the state of my education. And it was just, he just gave me the extra oomph to trust in myself. But I think, yes, to be constructive and non-destructive is true. He was just an extraordinary person with a lot of patience, and because they work in such a high level, they understand that the the objective of all of this is to have a little bit of alignment, or get as aligned as possible with 80, 70 people whose, wealth of experience will be vastly different depending of where they live, how they live their time, and that's the beauty of making music. You never know who's going to be in front of you and how are they going to make it. And being true to myself, yeah, it's the hardest part, because it's you really want to show to your community. You want to show yourself as true and I don't know, original as possible. And sometimes some people are ready to receive that, and some people are not, um, because they have made the decision already before you enter the podium. And learning that that's something that you can't control, people's perception of your taste or your vision of, it's the thing that makes it livable.
I also think you did such a great job of the bookends of this program fall in with that
Thank
so
you.
well. The I didn't know the Ortiz that well when you picked it, and then looking into it, it's not just this homage to Clara Schumann. It's Ortiz also. Like, if I'm having a dialogue with Clara myself, what does that actually sound like? How do I bring what's true for me into this piece? And on the other side of it, Dvorak and his Symphony Number 5, this symphony that didn't get published, and he for such a long time, but he didn't abandon it. He didn't throw it out. He didn't set it aside. He waited until the right time. He let it be the way he wanted it to be. I think that's just such a beautiful example of what you're talking about.
And I think, sometimes there's a lot of ways to make a program. One of them is to make contrasting pieces in conversation. This is not the case. They're not, they don't have similarities aesthetically. They just exist, the same as the Mozart. There's other ways to make connections. The connection of the nationality, it also is not part of the concept of this particular concert, or putting those kinds. And then you say, okay, how do you program these pieces that are so far away from each other? And I think for this particular program, when we started the conversation, and I mean, it was the first thing was definitely the Mozart that people are going to hear and be. I hope that they're excited to see the group, a group this big of soloists being part of the community in Omaha. And I think, that piece is also very uncharacteristic from Mozart. And I think the three pieces have that. The DNA is that they are transitional pieces that break every single boundary, and that they take the artist to the next level, to what is next. And for example, in Clara, she is experimenting a lot with impermanence, with strength, with with rhythmical power and prowess. But this piece is it's connecting to the next pieces that she will be doing, which is the Glitter Revolution, which won first best composition at the Grammys, and then Django. This piece took her to the next level as well, as the exercise. And same as the Dvorak, it's a transitional piece. It's a piece that has a lot of Brahms, a lot of Wagner, and the two very, I don't know, like people in the opposite side of Romanticism. And it's an homage to Beethoven, imbued with his own particular signature. Same as Gabriela. Like, they both had the same motivation of pushing the boundary to style. Like a piece like the Dvorak 8 or 9 from the New World would never exist if he hadn't the opportunity to go this far off in the fifth. And that's, for example, I've been studying this. I did the piece, the Dvorak, a couple of years ago, And I went to the score, and I'm like, the more that I studied, the less I mean, that was 2 months ago. I was like, I just don't get what's the linear trajectory of this piece, because it's very fragmented. How do I narrate what he was trying to do from A to Z? And it was just like, okay, Beethoven is the answer. Like in this, in Clara is the answer. It's not Robert. It has never been Robert. And for me, it's fascinating how people do those homage. This is the Dvorak is an homage to all these people that he was trying to emulate to find his own voice.
How do you, so you were saying, so if you're trying to find, if you have a piece like that where you feel like you've hit a wall, do you ever put a piece aside for a while and come back to it and let it sit? Or do you find it's best to just push through?
No, I do go in and out. I can't stay on a piece too long, because I don't want it to get like, I want to say, ripe in my ears or ripe in my hands, so I do get out of the piece, but I don't get out of the style. So I've been working with this Dvorak. I've been going in and out from the Slavonic dances, the Carnival Overture, and trying to find the DNA of the other pieces and see, okay, this goes this way in this piece, because at the end of the day, the language is, the way that they manage the language will be in other pieces. So I think a piece grows when you are working on others from the same composer. So last month, I actually, and that's how I program my season as a freelancer. I rarely program a composer just once throughout the season. So, for example, for Gabriela Ortiz, I did one of the younger pieces of hers in Norway a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. It's called Papalotes. And in June, I'm going to do the Glitter Revolution, which is her biggest piece and the most complex of them. So it gives me an opportunity to explore the language. And that's how I try to be mindful of that. Or, for example, with the Dvorak, I'm doing Carnival. And I don't know if I did the Dvorak.
Hi, how are you? Sorry, it went down.
It's okay.
Is it okay?
Okay. Yeah, this is great. Can you hear us all right?
Yes.
Okay. So we were, so Serena had a great question for you on top of that point. Yeah.
Yes. No, I just would love to hear how you would describe Ortiz's voice, talking about that trajectory that you've seen as a composer. Are there any comparisons that you would make? Is it kind of a wholly unique voice? How can we prepare as an audience for her unique voice? What are the things we could listen for or appreciate specifically that she brings to her compositions?
Well, I think she's one of the most original composers right now. She brings a unique perspective on Latin American sound that I don't think anybody has done yet, and it's a mixture of an incredible prowess and virtuosic technique. She knows very well the music of Mexico, music of Latin America, indigenous music, and traditional music, which is also very different. And at the same time, she is an extremely good orchestrator. She studied in London, so you can hear the complexity of London orchestration. And she also has spent a lot of time in Europe, in Italy, and those kinds of England and Italy in the 20th and 21st century are two countries that have a richness in brilliance. It's a brilliant element of orchestration that she brings. So everything you'll hear, the the way that she works and experiments with percussion. It's very unique, very bright, mm, very, very bright. I would say, but it's not bright. It's bright like the blinding sound in the desert that reflects in the sand. It's that kind of brightness. It's not hotness in brightness. I don't know. So I think that's the biggest part that you can expect. I think it's a piece that you can expect to be challenged by, and I think those are the best pieces that you don't expect much of their where it's going, and because it's the things that she is exploring are eternal permanence, impermanence is the word, and like eternal permanence in this world, and how these gifts of legacy stay throughout life and through time, so they don't happen necessarily linearly. So you can experiment the music a little more statically, and then when it comes from Robert and Clara, that are these columns from the past, and you can hear a little more like ruminating, more circular kind of melodies when it comes to Robert, because he was a person that navigated that kind of mental process, very ruminative, very obsessive, part of the way that he was wired. And Clara being the person who advanced that. So it's the way that she toys with that, and then at the end she's trying to answer the question of Clara when she was doubting at herself if she could be a composer, which at that moment in her diaries there's a lot of those kinds of quotes like, am I going to be, why am I doing this, which it has been now by the scholars credited to the volatility of the job, not necessarily that she doubted at her condition as a performer or as a composer. It was more about the state of the job while being a single mother with a person who wasn't, and with a lot of kids and trying to make a career for herself, which is kind of what women experience in the workplace, also in classical music at this moment. So it's a lot of things, I would say, sonically that happen. I would love for people and invite people to come with open ears to hear that kind of music and have a reaction to it, that it's just neutral to more than I expect that you enjoy it at the first glance. And I'm not saying that it's extremely complex. It's just that some things are meant to be absorbed a little bit, slowly, and that's completely okay.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I feel like you mentioned challenge and how you really like to rise to challenges and like really thrive in challenge. Is that something you enjoy searching for in all the music that you conduct, is kind of finding the parts that might bringing something kind of more extreme, something maybe from Yannick, who really likes to, if there's a fortissimo in Beethoven, like that is kind of this surprise moment, or making a sforzando really come out there. Are there moments that you like to bring out to challenge an audience, in specifically in all your music, or is it just kind of composer by composer what it is that they are trying to express to the audience?
No, I think that my job is to make sure that the music comes as the composer wanted it. And some composers thrive in extremes, and some of them have a different kind of storytelling. And I'm just I do it with all the passion, yes, but my passion is only bounded by the way that they want the storytelling to happen. Like I'm a very literal person, and like in that sense, that's how I feel I am throughout my entire life. I'm a very literal kind of individual. Like what you see is what you get, not filter. Not there's no filter in that sense.
I love the idea though of programming music where it's not love at first sight, and that's okay. And it's not coming in expecting to not love it either, but the absorption over time. I think so much we expect with media, any experience ever, it's like the first impression is the only impression, right? Like, oh, I love this show, or I love this music, or I love this book. And how you start feeling when you begin to engage with it is how you will continue feeling forever. And what you're kind of talking about is, no, you might come back to this and think about it later in the day and feel differently about it. And then maybe a few hours you'll think about it again and you'll feel differently there too. Do you find, do you ever encourage audience members to kind of do what you do when you study and find other pieces by that composer as a way of starting that process? Or do you not mind at all when someone comes in with just a completely blank slate and experiences it for the first time in the concert?
I think both experiences are valid. It depends of the level of engagement of everybody. I feel like in a lot of ways, and I don't want to sound crass, but the thing that I equate making a program is cooking. Like when you start cooking at the beginning, you cannot do, I don't know, molecular food. At the very first thing, unless you're like extremely talented and you know how to get flammables, but and at the same time cooking and eating, like it's for me, like my palate, that what I've eaten now in my 30s will never equate what I lived in my, I don't know, tens, when I was very little. Yet I do thrive in the nostalgia of those, recipes that maybe I haven't been able to experience because, I don't know, my elders died already and I haven't been, so there is about this nostalgia, but for me, it's always about the things that I can experience right now. And sometimes that takes some pieces or some people take a little more time to create the soundtrack, that create the trajectory, and some of them just come directly. So I think it's a little bit of both. It depends of how interested you are in discovering new things for yourself.
Mm-hmm. How about, you're the resident conductor of the LA Opera. How was opera like a natural calling for you, or was that one of those things where you wanted to expand what you could do? You wanted to challenge yourself?
It was a little bit of a natural trajectory. I have put my toes, like I have put like my eggs on every single basket in order to search for the opportunity. And when I started my master's, I went for wind ensemble, and I landed in wind ensemble conducting for my first master's because I loved the teacher and he was amazing at contemporary music. And at that moment in time, I was just very interested in contemporary music. It didn't matter how it came. And he was one of those people that were very open-minded. So he would give me classes at NEC, in England Conservatory, of everything. We would be doing orchestra pieces, we would be doing choral pieces. And one day he saw me actually doing recitatives and all of that opera, and he said, Lina, you have a natural talent for the voice that comes more naturally than other music for you. I mean, we were doing like highly like high contemporary pieces, those that are very abstract. So even though I loved abstraction, that wasn't like the most natural thing. And he was like, with boys, it feels like you connect very well. So why don't you get a little more instruction for that? And then I went to do choral conducting, and I did a diploma in choral conducting. Like I ended up doing both, just because it was connecting to the not to the repertoire but to the voice. And like I kept doing things and working with conductors in Boston, which it doesn't have that much opera, but I was doing little operas, things very very small. And then one day, my career progressed in weird ways. Like one day I was in Boston and then doing my doctorate, and then boom, I got into, I don't know, Philadelphia and all of these places. And in the middle of that job landed on my lap. I want to say, very luckily. I wasn't looking for it. It wasn't an application. They just called me and said, like, hey, we saw you in a couple of concerts. Would you mind doing an interview? And then I got the job. It was very crazy, how things progress. And I love working there, because it has given me an opportunity to grow into a different kind of universe. It's very different the way that you manage yourself in the opera world versus an orchestra world. And both of them are more complementary than they seem to be. So it's just a beautiful, fascinating experience.
How do you have to mentally prepare for an opera cycle as opposed to a symphony cycle?
Well, I think the opera cycle is a little more fluid, meaning that when you arrive to the 2 months or 8 weeks of production, that means that you will have to have your decisions already made, and those decisions will change very fast, maybe. And you have to be fluid about that without losing the vision of how you want the piece to go, because there's a lot of other visions involved, like directorial capabilities of the bodies, position, there's a lot of things that you need to adapt. So it's more flexible. And the exercise in community building is a little more, I want to say, fruitful. You make a community because you spend more time together, whereas in a symphony week, and I'm saying a guest week instead of a music director trajectory. In a guest week, it's a little bit like a blind date that goes perfectly well when things are aligned, or it can be a very bad blind date because chemistry is like that. And because you have a little time, it's hard to build from that. So you will have, like in the orchestra world, your vision is a little more set in order to make sure that it can happen faster. Like, of course, there is room. If you're able to build that trust faster, as fast as you can, there's room for that. But in opera, it's different.
There's no room for uncertainty at all. So if you,
you come ready to with your ideas, your vision, and you see how close you can align it with people's vision and people's capabilities of their instrument. But it's the same in opera. It's just that you have more time, and with time you can't negotiate.
Well, you've done so much. I've started as a pianist, got into singing, and then the podium, and now opera and orchestra, and all the things in between, all from your tiny little Casio keyboard, which still makes me so happy. But our last question for you today: if you had 30 minutes on stage, can be orchestra or opera, and you could try anything you wanted with no consequences, what would you try?
Oof, that's a very, I don't know. I think that's the question that I do every week that I go into the podium, that I go with that mentality, no consequences, you know? I go there and I try to be as fearless and try to jump the to the abyss every time. And that happens with every piece. I have to say my dream piece to conduct that I haven't done yet is Zarathustra. It's a little longer than 30 minutes, but the day that I do that day I would say those are the 30 best minutes of my life. But
Oh,
the exercise of doing that, sometimes I have to say, on January I was in Hong Kong and Taiwan for the first time, doing a tour with Anne-Sophie Mutter. And we were doing this piece. It's the violin concerto by John Williams, which is a masterpiece, extraordinary music. But every time I do it, I've done it already like 15 times. I think it's the piece that I've done more in my life right at this moment. Every time I go there and I'm about to get out and we say, okay, let's do it. We'll see how it goes. Like, let's see what tonight brings, because it's a gigantic, I want to say a monster of a concerto. That for me is what I feel like. I have to go there and just whatever happens, no consequence. We just go and live in the absolute moment.
I love that so much. That's perfect. Lina, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.